medicines from list number 1 have been purchased and sent to the country, and what is the price? As for medicines from the list number 2, we reach out to America and will inform you of the results. Money transfers from New York didn't specify either the beneficiary or the sender, but I presume that some of the money could have come from the national budget, designated for refugee care. To the Polish legation in Bern, September 1942, Receptus 171, the Ministry of Social Welfare requests information regarding how much of the sum of $200,000 has been spent so far. Are more funds needed for the further purchases of pharmaceuticals? After filling out the passport, putting down all the information previously provided, and adding the photograph, the passports went back to the Honorary Consul of Paraguay in Bern, Rudolf Hügli, who authenticated them with his signature. You can see that the passport is filled in handwriting which is different to the consul's signature, as well as the word he always added, consul. This made the document less credible, but nobody paid attention to that in those days. We're only paying attention to it now. Consul Hügli was a Swiss notary, and some of the passports were simply smuggled into the general government, and also owing to bribes which were paid to German officials. Some of them ended up in Consul Hügli's drawer. He would then send authenticated copies to Poland. Dear Mr. Grössner, I have the honor to inform you that, as the result of the efforts of your relatives, you have been granted citizenship of Paraguay. We request that you send us 2 photographs and personal information immediately so that your passport can be issued. Kind regards, Hügli, Consul.
That means with this letter, they had an official document to show to Germans, hey, I have a citizenship. I will get the passport, but I had to send pictures.
Mr. David Guzik and family, Warsaw. Mrs. Rosa Gottlieb and family, Opole. Mr. and Mrs. Kalman Blachas, Będzin. Mrs. Berta Jachman and family, Warsaw. Mrs. Mindla Bick and family, Warsaw. Mr. Salomon Kalnicki, Warsaw. Mr. Leon Rotfeld and family, Przemyślane.
In other cases, there are letters to recipients with the same text that they have become Paraguay citizen, and a passport is ready to be picked up. And at the same time, there was an attachment of a photocopy of such a passport, legalized by a Swiss notary.
It must be remembered that then a passport, at least a Paraguayan passport, was not just a passport for one person, but for the whole family. Many times, people completely unrelated to the beneficiary were added. It was a passport issued to a name, along with the wife, the children, mother and father. This is why the number of people who could leave on one passport was immeasurably greater than would be possible today. In the middle of 1943, when the passport initiative gained momentum, consuls from other South American countries joined in. Passports of El Salvador, Peru, Honduras, Haiti, and others were being issued. Switzerland was incredibly important to spies from all countries, both the Allies and the Germans. Mr. Chaim Eiss was infiltrated by a German agent. Fortunately, the spy was discovered, but the Germans had already found out about everything.
Oui, les Allemands ont été au courant, bien sûr, de cette affaire, malheureusement.
The Germans were convinced, like everyone else, that the Jews themselves, the Jewish organizations, were fabricating passports all along. Perhaps they didn't even realize that the passports were genuine. They were illegally issued, but genuine. The Swiss police managed to briefly detain some representatives of these Jewish organizations, but they realized that something was missing. They didn't have the blank passports. This was probably the first clue that there was a third party involved. That's when the Swiss police, from interrogations and surveillance, learned that the Paraguayan passports were being produced in the Polish consular office. One very interesting document is the transcript of a conversation between Alexander Ładoś and the Swiss Minister of Foreign Affairs, Marcel Pile-Golas, wherein the matter came to a head, with the Swiss accusing the Pole that the legation is participating in the process of creating documents. And Ładoś energetically defended Abraham Silberstein and others. He explained that the operation was about saving people's lives, and that in such a case, breaking some minor regulations, producing documents which would never be used on Swiss territory, was of no consequence to Switzerland, and in no way compromised its security. We only ask for you to turn a blind eye, because were this operation uncovered, it would seriously damage your reputation. After this confrontation, the Swiss just silently acknowledged what had been going on in a consular office, and Polish diplomats didn't suffer any further consequences. Even though they could have resulted differently, as they did in the case of Consul Hügli, whose exequatur, his authority to act as a consul, was withdrawn.
Egzekwator, czyli możliwość czy uprawnienie do wykonywania funkcji konsula.
La Suisse a eu une attitude extrêmement fermée et négative.
Switzerland adopted a strict attitude towards the flow of Jewish people crossing its border with German-occupied France.
La France occupée et avec l'Allemagne. Par contre,
on the other hand, they were more open to Jews coming from those parts of France not occupied by the Germans, but who were not from Vichy. In short, they feared persecution.
La peur était là.
Switzerland took in a large number of refugees, military and civilians. Of the civilians, approximately 22,000 were Jews, and approximately 7,000 to 8,000 of whom remained in Switzerland for the duration of the war.
Dans la guerre, il y en avait encore environ 7-8 000 qui étaient restés d'avant la guerre.
Alexander Ładoś allowed the Sternbuch family access to Polish ciphers. Access in the sense that whatever they wrote would be translated to Polish and sent encrypted to the General Consulate in New York, to a part of the leaders of the Jewish community there.
So everybody was informed. I mean, Roosevelt was informed. Everybody was informed about the Holocaust. Yeah, there were cables from Sternbuch to rabbis. And those rabbis tried also to influence the administration of Franklin Roosevelt. But Franklin Roosevelt was very passive, not cooperating in saving the Jews or bombing Auschwitz. And that's a separate chapter.
Now, what was the hope of the Jews after being constantly attacked and tortured by the Germans, taken forcefully to labor, robbed from their monies, robbed from their possessions? What was the hope? The hope was that England will finally, England and France, and here France was already defeated, and England and London was on fire. What was their hope? Their hope was gone.
Chciałbym mieć paszport Hondurasu. Honduras brzmi jak wschodni raj. Przyjemnie rzucić od czasu do czasu. Honduras właśnie to mój kraj. Chciałbym mieć paszport Urugwaju, mieć Kostarykę, mieć Paragwaj.
A person in possession of such a passport or a confirmation of such a passport was, in the eyes of German occupants, treated as a foreigner to whom occupation regulations could not apply. This is why a significant part of these passport holders was not sent to death camps, but were only interned as presumed citizens of neutral states. Those with a Paraguayan passport were sent to Vittel. That's not historically true. Some people were also interned in Bergen-Belsen, and there were other places where passport holders were interned. When the Germans entered into a state of war with the United States, a concept was devised where these citizens, or rather passport holders of South American countries, be used as some kind of trump card.
Posiadaczy paszportów południowoamerykańskich traktować jako swego rodzaju as w rękawie. Niemieckie władze
German authorities held the assumption that there were German citizens residing in both Americas who would most certainly be interned. In such a case, the people holding South American passports could be used as a type of insurance for those German citizens.
These 3 Paraguayan passports landed them first in the Paviak and then sent from the Paviak with other people who had these allied passports of various sorts to Vittel. And he's sitting in a train car with other Hasidic Jews who have passports from Uruguay. And they're sitting in a nice, this isn't a cattle car. These are people who are being transported from the ghetto, you can imagine what that is, in January of 1943, in seats, nice, I don't know if it was first class or second class, nice seats. And one of the Hasidim says to the other, so what if they ask us where Uruguay is and what language they speak in Uruguay? And the other Hasid says, what's the question? In Uruguay, they speak Uruguayish. That was the conversation that they had. And my father said, no, I tell them it's probably Spanish and it's in South America.